Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's special council meeting on February the 27th. As we normally do, we'll begin this afternoon by acknowledging that today we're gathering on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. We recognize our responsibility to serve as stewards for the land and honor the original caretakers who came before us. Our community is enriched by the enduring knowledge and deep-rooted traditions of the diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit in Kitchener today. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? There being none, does someone, I'm going to move the in-camera stuff now so that we don't accidentally forget later. Moved by Councillor Ioannidis, seconded by Councillor Johnson. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And we'll move on to the strategic session. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Chapman to open things up.
Great to be here today in what constitutes the fifth strategic session that we're having with Council on the new strategic plan. This is a process that started almost a year ago, and we've had a number of opportunities for great discussion with Council along the way. I hope you see today that the content that will be presented builds on the direction and the feedback that you provided in each of those four preceding sessions. But today is an exciting point in the process because we're at the point where we see how thousands of inputs have come together and have coalesced into 5 broad theme areas that should form the basis or might form the basis for our next strategic plan. To be clear, they're not wordsmithed in their final form today, but it's really a chance for you to have your first glimpse at them to see if they've captured well what you've heard at the door, what you've shared with staff, what we've heard through residents all the way along through the process as the basis for our next plan. And if your reaction today is the same as mine when I saw them, you won't be surprised. There shouldn't be anything here that's new or unexpected. Rather, you'll have the sense that these themes reflect the citizen and council priorities that we've heard much about and talked much about over the past many months. I hope you see that they respond thoughtfully to future trends and issues which will be impacting our community over the next 4 years and over the next 20 years. And today our goal is to validate that we've heard correctly, that we've heard well, that those themes reflect what you've heard and what are important to you and important to citizens, and also to have a chance to talk more about within those broad areas, what are the things that matter most for action over the next 4-year term of council. Again, these will represent inputs that we will take forward as we continue to build this strategic plan, which we hope to bring back in draft by June of this year. So with that, I'll turn it to Catherine Dever, who's going to walk through the highlights, and then we look forward to discussion later in the session.
Hello, Catherine.
Good afternoon, Council. Here's what we're going to cover this afternoon. So while the main body of why we're here today is to discuss the proposed strategic goal areas for the strategic plan, I'm going to do a little bit of review of Council's role in strategic planning, some of the roles and components and inputs into the process as well.
Sorry, can you kind of raise and adjust your mics over a bit?
Okay, is that better? You can hear me better now?
Yep,
yes?
Thank you.
Okay. So here's the work plan and timelines for developing our next strategic plan. We're currently in phase 4, which is the focus of today's update and engagement. And as we've worked through each phase, staff are synthesizing inputs and bringing back key themes for Council's feedback and reaction and governance. We have some great progress to share with Council today on the work that's been happening. So at each engagement with Council on our strategic plan, we've emphasized your governance role, and I'd like to provide a highlight of our previous engagements with Council and how your direction's been addressed. So last March, we overviewed the strategic planning process, including our work with Refocus Consulting Team and their innovations around sustainability offered through their enterprise evolution approach. At that meeting, staff engaged Council around what items are key to include in the process and in the community engagement. And we heard from you to include a focus on core city services. So this was definitely included in our engagement, providing context for residents to provide feedback on our services. In addition, a broad We Are Kitchener campaign was launched late last year and continues into 2023 with social media and physical signage throughout the community, building awareness in an engaging way of the valued city services that Kitchener provides. At that meeting, Council also requested that staff apply broad approaches to engage in different ways for the strategic plan. And we have, in fact, implemented a variety of online and in-person tactics and creative methods to get a greater reach of feedback for the strategic plan. Last May, at Council's review of the Environics survey results, staff engaged Council about what was important to include in the next phase of community engagement. And Council asked us to seek a broad range of voices in equity-deserving groups, which was a focus of our engagement when we reached a broader diversity of Kitchener residents than any previous strategic planning cycle. Council also requested that the following topics be emphasized in that engagement: satisfaction with city services, public engagement, sustainability, housing affordability, and recreation programs. And those all formed a focus of our engagement over the summer months last year. In August, in our final engagement with the previous council about community engagement underway at the time and key trends shaping Kitchener's future, council noted the following: that we should be focusing in the strategic plan on what the city can do or influence within our mandate. And so as staff in Compass Kitchener continued to hear broad ideas through community engagement, we've been filtering the input to those that we can have a role to implement, lead, or influence. Council noted the following key trends impacting Kitchener that were included by staff in scenario development toward a new vision and the strategic goal areas that we're proposing to you today: belonging, placemaking, sustainability, housing affordability, innovation, technology, and institutional trust. Last month, at the first session on strategic planning with the new council, the Compass Kitchener Advisory Committee provided you their community priorities for the new strategic plan. And while no direction was sought at that meeting, council engaged with the chair and vice chair to explore the engagement processes and the priorities a bit more deeply. Council at that time noted the close alignment with what you heard during the election campaign, and this high degree of consistency is carried forward in today's presentation. So the Kitchener Strategic Plan includes a few key components which together reflect the city's aspirations and commitments for Kitchener as outlined here. So our vision is our 20-year community vision for a desired future of Kitchener and what we as a city are striving for on behalf of the community. Within this 20-year time frame, the city sets a series of strategic plans aligned to each term of council to make meaningful progress toward that vision within a 4-year cycle. Strategic goal areas represent the focus areas in which the city can take action to make change in themes that are important to residents. And then finally, actions outline the specific commitments and progress the city will make within each goal area, often reflected as projects in our annual business plan. There are a variety of inputs into the strategic plan and the proposed goal areas that we're reviewing today, and engagement highlights that have been shared with council along the way. Environics provided results from a statistically valid survey of Kitchener residents as to what's important to them. Broad community engagement delved deeper into key themes identified by the survey and the areas council wanted to learn more about. Compass Kitchener identified and shared their community priorities, and our new Plan With Us resident panel is having deliberate discussions, learning, and understanding about trade-offs to provide feedback on the goal areas and actions. So the proposed strategic goal areas for the Strat Plan represent the synthesis of all of these broad community engagement inputs and points. In addition to engagement, as part of our work within the Enterprise Evolution framework this time around, staff considered a broader systems view of social, environmental, economic, and organizational areas, including assessing what could Kitchener influence to ensure resilience and sustainability, where's their momentum or motivation to continue making progress, and what value could be generated for the community, society, and the environment in a specific goal area. So staff have grouped the key community interests and key priorities into 5 areas with working titles and a concept of why they're important to Kitchener and the difference they could make by being part of our next strategic plan. So today we'll give council a sense of the overall focus of each of these, and the corporate leadership team will now share in presenting these 5 areas with council, after which we'll engage in a discussion around them.
So I'll kick off and speak to the first goal area that you see in front of you today. But before I do, I just want to acknowledge that we see a high degree of consistency in these goal areas and what we've heard from council as we met with you since the election. As you recall, I engaged in a series of one-on-one meetings with councillors, and it was compelling the amount of consistency in your feedback around the areas that you said were important to your residents and important to you. We heard about the priority of parks and outdoor spaces. We heard about the priority of improvements to traffic safety and active transportation. We heard about the importance of housing and of sustainability and climate action. Those were 4 themes that consistently came up in our conversations, and you'll see those 4 themes well represented in these 5 goal areas today. The first one that I'll speak to, the first of 5, is a theme that has a working title of belonging and participation. This is a goal area that would focus on community and citizen well-being and thriving by greater access to responsive city programs and services, newcomers feeling welcome and embraced by the community, and citizens feeling involved and empowered through meaningful engagement with the city. It includes things like civic engagement, community connection and belonging, the newcomer experience, a healthy and active community, and considerations around reconciliation. And my observation, Council, on this theme is that it has its origins, at least in my mind, over 20 years ago. 20 years ago, this community articulated a vision that had 3 operative words in it: innovation, caring, and vibrancy. Caring was one of 3 terms that were chosen with intention around a vision. And I've seen how this community has grown into the vision of being a caring community in my time with the city. And you may recall that 4 years ago in the strategic plan that Council approved, caring community was one of 5 themes. It hadn't appeared that way in our plan before, but we had heard from citizens this was a priority and from Council as well. And so even though the title is changing, I see this theme carrying on, and in fact growing in this new iteration of the strategic plan. And for me, one of the most significant changes is referencing the importance of welcoming newcomers to the community. As Council knows, we'll welcome 5,000 people on average to the community each and every year as we go forward. This region will welcome 8,000 new permanent residents every year, so we know a large proportion of the new residents in Kitchener will be coming through immigration, will be new permanent residents. And so our ability to welcome newcomers well, to integrate them into the life of the community, is of critical importance if we're going to succeed and thrive. And so this is a priority that you see reflected in this theme area, something that we see in the Environics survey results for the first time over this past year, and something that we know is important to Council and the community. And so belonging and participation would be the first of 5 proposed goal areas for the next strategic plan.
Thanks, Dan. I'm going to speak to the second proposed goal area, which is housing, land use, and mobility. This area focuses on planning for and providing a built environment that meets all the needs of our residents, improves housing access and affordability, enables mobility through a variety of transportation modes, and preserves valuable green spaces. The area includes a lot of the priorities we've heard are important to members of Council, the public, and even our own staff, including things like housing, transportation, sustainable land use and urban growth, parks and outdoor spaces, trails, active transportation, and traffic. And many of you will know that I was born and raised in this community, and I have a great passion for creating and supporting great neighborhoods throughout Kitchener. And so many of the priorities that fall into this area are about creating well-planned and connected neighborhoods. A city that's connected by accessible trails for walking and biking. A city with diverse and accessible parks and other outdoor public spaces where people gather to connect with one another. And a city where people like my daughters and their friends can afford a home when they get older. And a home in a unique and special place where they can connect with one another. So as you can see, in the past strategic plans, we've talked a lot about great neighborhoods, and I see so much of what's in this category being the foundation upon which those neighborhoods can flourish. So with that, I'll pass it over to Jonathan.
Thanks, Michael. I have the next 2 goal areas. So the third area is environment and climate action. And this goal area focuses on environmental sustainability and resilience, planning and providing infrastructure and programs to respond to climate change, transitioning towards low-carbon renewable energy sources, and supporting residents to make sustainable choices. Now, this area includes the following priorities: climate adaptation and mitigation, energy mix, and tree canopy natural systems and areas. And this goal area certainly aligns with the work that the city continues to advance as part of its corporate climate action plan, which is planned to come back to Council for renewal later this year. As Council is aware, commitments have also been made under Transform Waterloo Region as we work towards community energy transition. And the city's urban forest strategy is another example that ties into this goal, which also supports the need to adapt to a changing climate. And so this is one area that certainly is important for the community, and we've heard through the feedback through the planning process. The fourth goal area is focused on economic prosperity and opportunity. And this goal area is about strengthening the economic ecosystem in Kitchener, ensuring there is meaningful engagement between the city and business community, and building an environment where a diverse community of businesses and entrepreneurs are connected, well supported, and strong. It includes the following priorities: employment, innovation culture, which would be focused from an external perspective, private sector health, workforce also from an external perspective, entrepreneurship, small business, community health, and private investment in Kitchener. Now, we know that given the recent economic challenges that we are facing, that it's more important than ever to ensure that we're creating the right conditions to support a strong local economy where businesses can thrive. And certainly through the city's Make It Kitchener 2.0 strategy, I believe the city is well positioned to do that, and know that this will continue to be an area of focus, not only for the current term of council, but also beyond that. And that's why I think it aligns well to include it as an area of focus for the strategic plan. And with that, I'll pass it over to Victoria to touch on the last goal area.
Good afternoon. The fifth and final goal area is good government. This area focuses on the core enabling foundations and systems related to the city organization and workforce, including skill enhancement and development, leadership capabilities, employee attraction and retention, a strong and diverse workforce committed to public service, and the city being regarded as an excellent place to work. It includes the following priorities: data management, employer identity and value proposition, financial health, organizational and leadership capacity, stakeholder relationships, and innovation culture, which is an internal-facing goal. So as an organization, Kitchener has a long-standing tradition of looking inward to make sure that we have structures, systems, and processes in place to support excellent customer service. But what really sets us apart is our people. We are a workforce of more than 2,000 people, and while we all have different roles and skills and abilities, what we share in common is a commitment to public service and a passion for doing good work. We have an internal hashtag here at the City of Kitchener that says, "This is where we want to work." It arose in 2006 out of a comprehensive employee culture survey process, and it really articulates simply and eloquently who we are and what we want to do. As we look ahead to the next strategic plan, we remain committed to delivering excellent public service that meets or exceeds citizen and council's expectation. And we know that's not possible without a powerfully engaged workforce, essentially the people behind the plan.
And so with that, I would like to open it up for discussion this afternoon around our two engagement questions for council. So first, have staff accurately summarize council and community priorities in these 5 strategic goal areas. And within each of the goal areas, where would you like to see particular emphasis placed as we establish term of council priority actions?
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks for the presentation. It was great to see it be so interactive and have several of you engaged with it. I know some folks have said it would be great if we can get this deck afterwards. It essentially lines up with the 5 goals that are on here, but certainly we can ask staff to email it out to council afterwards. So I see a couple of people in the queue who want to start off the discussion. So I will actually ask people to feel free to comment on one or both at the same time, and staff will take notes accordingly. And we'll start off with Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and this is probably one of the most important and paramount things this council will do for this term of council. As it's been said before, and just the importance of those words, I think are really, should be impactful on us to make sure that we set the tone right for a community, because it will shape what Kitchener will be from decades from now. So I had a few clarification questions as well. Would that be okay, Mr. Mayor, regarding the priorities? So before I can get my comments. So very quickly, for item number 2, for housing and land use and mobility, I like that as a terminology as opposed to saying housing affordability. Again, market dictates the affordability. Affordable housing is not necessarily the mandate for a lower-tier municipality. This really does go into specifics of how can we create, faster housing options. I'm sorry. So with that, my question would be, what tone or sense will the strategic plan take that articulates that there needs to be an urgency to create, faster housing units in our community? Someone has mentioned that there's 5,000 people coming. And out of that 5,000, is that students as well, on top of just residents coming, choosing to make Kitchener their home? So that would be my first question. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Chapman.
So thank you for the feedback, Councillor Singh, and I'm not being cheeky in my response, but I take it more as a comment than a question. I don't know that I have a complete answer for you today, except to say that we'll be coming in a few weeks with a housing pledge to Council, which will lay out Council's commitment to achieve its most aggressive housing target ever over the next 10 years. And I think the kind of language that you said in that housing pledge will be the kind of language that we'll incorporate into our strategic plan. So in that sense, the timing is perfect, that you're going to be making a 10-year commitment to achieve an incredible target. And I take your point that that sense of commitment needs to be reflected in the strategic plan as well. So I think this is a work in progress, but it's a great point, we'll note it, and the timing lines up well.
Okay. If ever anyone had to summarize how I ask my questions, question and the comment is exactly how I do every time, so, and I apologize. So my comment further to that would be that we have to set a bold enough target, and it has to be articulated clearly, that is a priority that this council is setting forward, and that in itself will, guide us with the policies. The later part would be for number 3, environment and climate action. These are very forward-looking objectives, right? But at the same time, that's also a very reactionary concern as well. With the changing climate, there are issues that we will deal with today. So as that priority, what emphasis will be given to that, the constant change in the environment and obviously the impact to our municipality? How will that balance play in part? Will the strategic plan lay that out? Is it, are we trying to do good work that we're trying to protect the future generations, or also is the emphasis priority given as part of our finance, our budget, to mitigate the climate change that's happening right now?
And I think it will be a combination, both in terms of how we will articulate a clear goal statement around this goal area, and then the specific actions. And one thing that we're contemplating is how far do we go to predict actions for the entire 4 years of the plan, and this is something we'll come back to Council to discuss at a future session. So it may be that we're not able to identify and respond to all the initiatives that we may need to in this area over the 4 years, but we may need to be a bit more nimble to identify specific things within that 4-year time frame.
Thank you. And this strategic plan is even more so unique because we're looking at a 20-year horizon. And that's why I'm saying that I think we need to outline what that balance is going to be, right? We only have, a very finite amount of monies, and either we can be reactionary or we can also focus on doing good, but there's only so much we can do on either end. And I think we have to place that priority for at least this term, if not looking outward as well. The later part is for economic prosperity and opportunities. It's great. Will that focus on what good work we've done already, right? It's not necessarily what more we can do, but also continuation with support of Communitech, our emerging tech sector, change in employment that's happening within the city, moving from manufacturing, and still kind of evolution to advanced manufacturing, the needs of those businesses, ensuring that we can bring some more industrial lands that we still have capacity for, or how we can better, in the land use planning perspective, create greater options for people to work in many different places, depending on whatever business that they have, than the way we do things now. Will that be an effort as well?
Yeah, I think it can include all of those. So when we come back to Council at a future session with proposed actions within these, I think we'll have some more specific ideas, but that's actually a great example of where staff looked at where our existing commitments and momentum already exist. and to underscore an area within the strategic plan that reflects that. This is a great example of that with the work we've done with Make It Kitchener and the ongoing services we provide the business community.
Perfect. And my comment further to that would be, I think it needs to articulate the emphasis and the importance of partnership with our institutions, our educational institutions, and what that would play in part for economic prosperity and development as well. With a little bit of time, well, I don't, but I'll quickly ask if you allow me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. For good government, I love that as a terminology, and I think that's what should be striving for to endeavor, right? Where's accountability in that? I think it's internally focusing. I like that. How can we do better for those that we employ, but also accountability to those that we serve? How will that play in part?
I don't see anybody from staff. Oh, Mr. Chapman? Oh, sorry. I was taking it as Councillor Chapman. Apologies.
One of the innovations that the Refocus team has brought to us through this process that we're quite excited by is to do a lot more in this plan with targets and indicators. And so I was actually going to speak to your previous comment around economic development, but I think it applies here as well. One of the things we'll engage council on is a robust discussion around not just what actions do we want to take, but what targets do we want to set, and what are the meaningful indicators that will demonstrate how we're making progress towards those targets. And so I think Councillor saying it addresses directly what you've said. What are the indicators that matter to citizens in terms of service delivery? What can we measure, and how do we track our progress against those? And so that will be something that will be a new feature of this plan that we've not had in previous versions of it.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I think through my questions and comments really spoke to the later part, this, part two of the questions, just in part one of where those priorities are perhaps missed. From council perspective, I have one more, but I'll key back in so I'm not monopolizing.
Thank you. Councillor Deneau.
Thank you very much. As with regards to an emphasis within these goals, I would love to see a more local, buy local within the city of purchasing and procurement than maybe we have done in the past. I remember during the budget, I had asked a question, you know, when we're looking at purchasing, are we looking at the cheapest, or are we looking at whether it's built locally in Kitchener, Ontario, and I believe the answer was we usually look for the cheapest. And so, you know, if we put more of an emphasis on buying local, you know, it will hit goal 3 and number 4, you know, for environmental concerns, it's local, you know, we're sustaining a local workforce, we're building, and we're committing to our community. You know, we have some great smart-minded people around here that I think, you know, when you look at purchasing a piece of equipment, you know, I get, you know, the dollars only go so far, but if we invest in our own community, the benefits I think are greatly outweigh than buying the cheapest piece of equipment. And so I would love to see more of an emphasis, and again, I'm not sure, you know, what the emphasis is, but like I said, through the budget process, you know, the answer to me was we usually go for the cheapest, and so I would love to see, you know, a higher uptake of our local manufacturers in the city, or even the region, or province-wide, and you know, I think that's one area I think we should focus on.
Thanks, Councillor Deneau. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it's like Councillor Deneau is reading my mind there as well. That's certainly something that I think about as well. But when I look at the questions that you've put here for discussions, I think that you have accurately summarized where we have been looking at. I think one piece that truly is missing here is our ability to do things on our own. And as I look at all of these initiatives, it really brings home to me that many of the things that we're looking at doing, we're a little stymied by our what we can do in terms of the province, and in some degree in terms of the federal government as well. What I would like to see whenever we look at these goal areas is how are we advocating to the province that these things are important to us and that we need to be working with them. Where's our piece in doing that? It's one thing for us to have our own Kitchener, Made in Kitchener, We Are Kitchener strategy, but we can only do so much. When I look at buying local, for one thing, the way that our procurement policies are set out is by the provincial government, and it is basically lowest common denominator in many cases. When I look at what we can do around housing, we can do a lot of things locally, but a lot of things we're also stymied by. As well, our urban forest strategy. It's one thing for Kitchener to be building up by 2050, increasing it by 30%, but we've got a provincial government that's looking at building in areas in Ontario that we haven't looked at doing before. How are we addressing that piece? And perhaps as a question for the mayor, who I didn't ask him, didn't say I was going to ask that ahead of time, but I think it's something we really, really need to look at. Thanks.
So I see Mr. Chapman has clicked in, so I'll let him start and I may jump in.
One of the things that I'm excited by is the opportunity to go further in building a government relations strategy each year that is aligned with the strategic plan. I would say it's not something that I've been involved with before, and I recognize there's a huge opportunity to do what you've just described, which is to say, in these areas that we've agreed are a top priority for council and for the community, what is our advocacy plan that we're going to consistently work to advance these issues with the government? I think we're well positioned to do that starting with this term of council, and so that's personally a priority. I know it's one that the mayor supports, and so we look forward to working with council to build that out.
I think maybe just building on that, I think it's fair to say that it is something that we have done based on our priorities as a city over the last number of years, and quite frankly, have financially been more successful than many others, including the almost 50 million that we got. I think it was 49.9 if I remember correctly, that we received for climate mitigation, plus many other grant programs, both provincial and federal. But I think at a time now when we know that government funding is probably going to start, because of some of the financial pressures, start being a little slimmer going forward, being more disciplined in our approach is going to be key, and this document is going to really help drive that both provincially and federally, both with the governing party and then when appropriate using the opposition parties to help us with our advocacy as well as we do with at FCM, for example, or at AMO, in terms of our approach with everyone and trying to build the case for different things, whether it's financial or from a policy perspective. Is that it for you? Okay. Councillor Clancy.
Thank you so much. I am pleased to hear that there are so many diverse voices. I think that's something that came up a lot at the door, as we have such a mixed community, so I'm glad to hear that such an effort was made to make sure all voices are represented. I think that helps us with our advocacy and our equity as a value, a core value of the city. I echo what Councillor Johnston was sharing about advocacy, that, it's important that we really feel empowered to kind of share what our values are and push that forward to various levels of government. A few things stood out that I'm just curious about. It's kind of woven in, but I wonder if it could take a more of a high profile. When it comes to the climate section, like sometimes what happens in any organization is climate's over here, right? And I'm wondering if there's a way that climate could also be woven into the social, economic, and organizational layers. I think as an organization, our economic development will do much better if we, focus on green technology, for example. When it comes to housing, et cetera, like how do we work with our stakeholders, builders in the community to set our targets on our green development standards, for example. That could go under climate, but it could also go under housing. I think equity, of course, I think we'll be seeing emergencies, we'll be seeing big storms, we'll be seeing extreme heat that will affect our vulnerable folks. And how do we prepare as an organization for that? So that was just something that stood out to me, is how do we take climate that sometimes gets put over here in this department and really weave it into the various focuses of our plan. I think that's the best way that we can really look at it in a holistic way, and same with equity, right? Like, how do we weave that into all the things that we do, whether that's planning, whether that's parks, etc. The other thing that I thought could complement was the protection of housing. We look at the building of affordable housing as the responsibility of the region, and we can add to that. We can, do within our means to partner with various levels of government, with the not-for-profit sector, with the private sector, to encourage more units. But I think we're missing a big portion when we don't look at the protection of privately owned affordable rentals. I just read a stat recently where for every unit that's built, 15 units are lost. So I think when we look at the homelessness situation in our community, people on the wait list, what can we do as a city to kind of reflect on that protection and that big part of our housing market, and put that into our plan as, I know it's something that we're looking into, but how do we make that something to weave into our housing approach as a city? So I don't think I'm asking questions. Let me see what they were again. But those are just things that stood out to me as possible complements to what's in the plan so far.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I feel like definitely those core priorities resonate really well with what I heard at the door, what I think we share as our values as a council. So it's good to see it laid out like this.
Okay, great. And just on your stat, I'm wondering if the number was meant to be the other way around? Because you said for every one built, we're losing 15?
Yeah,
I think you mean the other way around.
No. For every unit of affordable housing that the region builds, in that same period of time, we lose 15 units of privately owned affordable units. So, we are losing affordable units in the private sector at a 15 times rate as we build them as a region.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Or not-for-profit sector? I can send the paper that I got it from.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Davey, you're up next.
Thank you. To answer the first question, I would say yes, the community priorities are well captured within this, but having said that, there's an awful lot in here too, so I'm really thankful that the second follow-up question is there as well, because it's all about where we set our priorities. So there's just going to be comment. There's no question here really, unless staff wants to comment. I would say first and foremost, I think I do agree that climate change adaptation and mitigation needs to be, if we're going to prioritize them, needs to be among the top priorities that we have there. It's not specifically asked about whether we want to see lower priority areas, and I'm not going to speak to all of those that I think are possibly less important. I am increasingly, I'm not supposed to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, I am increasingly concerned about the level of engagement that we try to attain and its actual value. Statistically significant engagement means an awful lot to me, but once you go beyond that, when it's the same folks that seem to be engaging with us over and over again, the same items, that information is less valuable to me. So I guess I would say I wouldn't want to see excessive resources put into that. The other thing I feel I have to, and it is mentioned here, but I need to stress, is the basics of what we do as a city. A lot of times when we do these strategic plans, a lot of it's very, high level, aspirational, but at the same time we have to remember that we have, grass to cut and roads to repair and sidewalks that are uneven that need to be done, and I would not want to see any of that replaced with this more blue sky thinking stuff, because that is the core of what we do. And if I've heard Mr. Chapman correctly, we're going to be setting new parameters in place too to make sure, and have measurables to make sure that we are doing that work. On the actual aspirational stuff, the one thing that it is covered here, but I would certainly want to see more interest in, and it's the last thing I'm going to talk about, is leveraging technology. One of the biggest line items in our budget every year is salaries and wages. And at the end of the day, how much work we can do depends on how much money that we have. So there's two ways to get more productivity per worker. That is to continually burn out staff, which is not a long-term solution. The other alternative is to leverage technology to make sure that fewer members of staff can actually achieve more work. And I think, and actually it's interesting that we're not dealing with a 20-year plan now, we're dealing with a 4-year, but I think we need to look at both these intertwined. I do think we need to better prepare ourselves to leverage technology going forward. And really the key in that now, I think we're at an inflection point where technology, artificial intelligence, et cetera, will be able to access data and plan things for us better than we can. Things like snowplow routes in a more efficient manner, grass cutting in a more efficient manner, these basic things that we do. So how we can prepare for that really is making sure the quality of the data that we collect, we work towards that as this revolution comes at us. So I think we definitely need to make sure that we're collecting data, making sure the data is clear, it's accessible for when this inflection point comes. I also think within the technology space, I think that, I think we should be a leader in that sort of thing. I would like to see us be a bit of a pilot city and trying things and possibly failing at things and saying, you know what, yeah, we tried that and it failed, but we're trying to be a leader in terms of the technology that we leverage. And the final thing on the digital divide, on technology is the digital divide. I think it's very important to remember that in terms of the whole equity piece, there's a lot of members of our community that are left out of. They're socially isolated because they do not have access to technology. Most kids live their lives through their cell phones and their online accounts. I think we need to make sure that they're not socially isolated in that space, and electronic recreation is very much as important as physical recreation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. A lot of great questions and comments been made around the horseshoe, and overall, I think what we see here on paper is really good. So, but I just want to give a little bit of my perspective. As far as procurement, I've had the same issue being dealt with by me, by some folks that feel that we've changed a few things, which I think we may be seeing something down the line, just for staff to be prepared for that. But anyways, back to what Councillor Johnson said, and I think Councillor Davey had mentioned it too, is us staying in our lane and working in our lane. And I think that's important that we continue to focus in what our priorities that we can do within our capacity. But anyways, when I'm looking at Goal 1 in civic engagement, and Councillor Davey kind of touched upon it too, what I've been seeing is there's a lot of bullying engagement that's been going on. And I'm not sure how to articulate that, because it just seems like the goal is come jam the council chambers and then point the fingers, but meanwhile, I don't see that as I see that as a bullying tactic in trying to bulldoze what decisions are being made. That's where we're starting to come across. We're starting to see a little bit more of that. So I would like to see better engagement that would involve with better communication, and I think the GR position, as what was mentioned, would help with that, but also with our chief of staff and everything else that's coming along, that I think we should have a little bit more participation on that and be able to coordinate those things so that we don't have those types of engagements where I feel like we're being bullied into making decisions. As far as housing, I like the lens of wanting to incorporate greening aspects and environmental sustainable aspects in it, but I don't think that's the most prudent approach for us to do as a municipality. I think we get a better bang for our buck for the province and for Canada is if we had it as a provincially mandated process. So like us doing like some kind of type of planning, like let's say we have to build certain green. It should be like this, universal for every municipality. It shouldn't be any different for every municipality. I think that's where I think that's the approach we need to go. We need to do more of a provincially focused on that with the environmental focus. Otherwise, we're just creating more bureaucracy and we're creating more, not that it's a bad thing that we want to do these things. I think it's a great thing that we want to do things, but I think we need to do it more efficient. It needs to be at a higher level than what we are, and not just a inmate Kitchener approach, but it should be so if someone wants to come and do a development in this community, they go to another community, it's all very similar. And that's where I think we need to go if we want to have efficient housing and to accomplish some of the goals that we're looking at. Again, housing is something that's very important to me, but I feel like we're still too broad of a perspective of what we're looking at, and I think the real big issue in the entire community, and which is somewhere our lane, is we should be focusing on the greater focus on attainability rather than looking at the lowest end of the spectrum, which is, I feel, is a regional concern. I mean, not that we're going to say no to any of these things, and we can always assist, and if we can provide land or anything like that, by all means, but I think the greater focus is the greater attainability. What I hear is, how are my kids are going to live? That's what I hear all the time. So, and I think that's something that's within our lane. As far as the environment is concerned, I think we're doing a really great job. We're starting to move forward with that, and I don't really have too many concerns. I think we're going to get where we're going to get there, just slowly but surely, but within the time commitments that we've committed to, even though it's still probably slow to what the public would be expecting. Economic development and like the prosperity and opportunity, I think, you know, I know I've been mentioning this a few times. I feel like we're missing one part of the sector here with regards to film and music and arts. I think it should be all combined into one. And I think that will help, you know, with all the creation of jobs that are new to this community, but would also, you know, create a better quality of life for our residents if we're focusing on that, because it's all great. And I'm pretty sure that's all in there, but I'm just going to keep reiterating my points because just the other day I saw a big announcement out of Markham with another studio, and I feel like we're just keep falling behind and you know, I think we're the best situated community in all of Canada, in my mind, to move with this, and we just seem to get nowhere. And then with good government, I think, again, if we're dealing with better communication and more proactive communication on our part, I think we can have a good government. And I mean, I know we have one now, but I'm just saying if we can be a better and more improved and give us better, you know, better stakeholder relations. If we had better communications, it'd give us better, you know, in dealing with issues more proactively and all that stuff. But otherwise, these are no forms of criticism or anything. I just, I feel like we are doing what we can, and these are just the little areas that I feel like we could tweak upon. And but overall, what I see here is pretty well what I think is what I've been hearing overall. Like, I mean, this is terrific, good stuff, and that's it. Sorry I talked too much.
Okay, thank you. We're going to continue along. Councillor Singh, I'll come back to you because the others I don't believe have spoken yet. But I also want to note for folks, we have a training session starting in 7 minutes. That I guess we'll have to start a little late, but if folks can keep that in mind. Councillor O'Dooney.
Thank you very much. I will keep this brief. This is fantastic, I think, in reference to question number 1. Yes, you have summarized this really well, so thank you very much for the great work put into this. I would love, if we are, I know Councillor Clancy brought up affordable housing, and I think it would be great if we can get a proper definition and we all stick to that definition, because, I mean, I've heard people talk about there's a 30% mark. I've heard the reference to, a place where my kids can, when they grow up, they have a place that they can live, they can afford, and affordable for people as well. So perhaps if we know what the terminology is for each of those, and if we're going to use it in the strategic plan, it would be great if we're able to just differentiate each one of those, so we're all just on the same page around that. That for me is number one. Number two, under belonging and participation, I love the civic engagement. I think this is something that I brought up a few times. I do think we do a good job now when it comes to educating. When you go on the website, you see things about how the budget process works and all those different things. However, I feel time and time again when I speak to people, when I'm having conversations with people in my ward, I don't know about other wards, they seem not to be aware of what's going on, and there always seems to be a shock around, oh, my speed limit changed, or oh, this changed, or that changed, without them being aware. And I understand people are probably so busy living their lives, they're not paying attention. It's mostly the really, really engaged people that tend to get information. So my concern, or how can we engage those that are paying their taxes, and they tend to react after changes have been made, and they're upset, not because of the change made, but they weren't engaged in that process as well. So that's something that comes to my mind. And then, since I'm fairly new at this, maybe that's why I'm asking this question and others know it. I know when I usually do strategic plans, I would love to hear and see the current state of things. And I know I can't even say the name, I might bite my tongue, Enviro, whatever, Nautics, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. We all know what I'm talking about. I'm aware that we do have that survey, but I'm interested in hearing when it comes to economic prosperity, what our small businesses are saying, what are some of their challenges and concerns. So as we build a strategic plan, I would like to know the current state as we determine what the future state is. And I don't know about others, I feel like I don't have that clear current state of things when it comes to these 5 categories. But that's all I have, but thank you very much for this. This is awesome, great start, thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor O'Dooney. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. I think there are some great ideas here. I like the idea of the governance, piece of working with the provincial government and the federal government, and make sure that, we're heard, and that we, that our positions are understood, and I think that's very important. I really like the idea of weaving the environmental component throughout everything we do. And I think if we're serious about climate change and how we're going to fight it at our level, because the municipal government has a huge responsibility to get this right. So I think that's really important throughout. I also like I like pretty well everything that's been said here, and I don't have much to add, but I did want to ask, what's missing? Because I look at this and I can't think of even one item that, I assume all of these goals are going to be flushed out, right? I mean, I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of what I think should be done here, here, and here, because I think that's going to come as this process advances. But I can't see anything that's missing. I mean, it looks like a complete shopping list 10 years ago as well as today, with maybe more emphasis in one area than another. So I just wonder if you think there is anything that you purposely left out because you feel we've already maybe accomplished that goal, or it's just not relevant in today's environment.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, I can't think of anything specifically where there was a conscious decision made to leave it out. What I can say is that I do believe these represent a consensus on a value set that drives action in these areas. So a good example of that would be caring community, or what's been defined here as, what was it, belonging and participation. There's a significant focus on newcomers in this next iteration of the plan. That language was not in our previous plan. It was about care and community in the previous plan, which was not present in the plan before it. And so what we see is an evolution in this community of thought around what it means to be a welcoming community for people to have belonging within the city. And so what I can tell you is over the next 4 years, there will be a focus on newcomers like there hasn't been before in the actions and decisions and the budget recommendations and the policies of the city. And so I liken it to an ocean liner that doesn't turn on a dime, but we will look back in 20 years' time and we'll say there was an inflection point where something was in the collective consciousness of the city, and the city began to orient its efforts in that direction, and it led to transformation over time. And I think if you look in each goal area, some more than others, you see those thoughts that are reflected in the input or reflected in the analysis that move us in a direction. And that's unique to Kitchener as compared to Waterloo or Cambridge or anyone else. So I do concede that it is comprehensive, and you and I have had good discussions before about the value of strategic plans. I would look beyond that to say, where are the changes in the language? Because those are meaningful, and those will guide decision-making over this term.
Yeah, and I did notice the newcomer component to it, and I think that's very important. I just wanted to emphasize one item, and that is with engagement. And I think, Compass Kitchener's report I think it was last year or the year before, highlighted the fact that people were feeling that their thoughts and their comments weren't being taken into consideration. So I think we need to keep that in mind as we talk about community engagement and think of ways to do it, not just so that people have the opportunity to voice their opinions, but that it maybe always be cognizant of the fact that those comments have a place in what we do. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor Rivanovic. The goals have been captured very well. I think we're listening to what our citizens has said has been captured in this. So we'll be serving them by fleshing these goals out. It's very clear to me that Kitchener is a city of good neighbors. You can tell that by the priorities and the goals that we have here, that the engagement kind of encapsulated, and we're going to be moving on. I agree so much as what's been said already. When it comes to the belonging part, I feel most of our citizens really want to welcome people and include people. Sometimes we just don't know how and don't know where the opportunities for that are. I think if they're there, then that'll happen. With housing, with affordability, it can't all be on the developer. I think we have all seen where a developer comes to council with a proposal and it's like, hey, what are you going to do? But what are we going to do to help that? And there's things that we can't control. For example, the real estate market. We could have all sorts of things in place and have a developer create housing that is affordable. And 2 years later, with the real estate market, the price of that home could go up. We've seen housing prices climb a lot because of the pandemic we were in and the demand and the shortages of laborers and materials. With the environment, keep doing what we have been doing and grow on that. We've got some great economic development goals. How we flush those out is going to be important. And I just feel that, the economic development to more networking opportunities, like we do it in the arts, we get the arts groups together, but maybe we can get our business groups together. I know we have the Chamber of Commerce and they do a lot of good work as well, but just trying to do that. And I feel, I think we're in a good place. This is not a starting point. This is a growing and continuation point and building on some good work that has already begun. So I really look forward to working with council and staff on this and really making this continue to grow and make a positive difference in our citizens' lives.
Thank you, Councillor Schneider. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. Everything's been said. I'm last around the horseshoe again, always. The one piece that I wanted to touch on, I'm not going to go into every little piece, is the housing, land use, and mobility with regards to sustainable land use and urban growth. I look at, particularly in the suburbs, we're growing up, we're growing out, and we're doing a lot of that fast for obvious reasons. We're in a housing crisis, and there's space, and then it's the developer's world right now, which is not a bad thing. But I worry that we're growing up and out so fast that we're losing what is coined the 15-minute community, or we're not going to get there. And I see we do a great job on outdoor spaces and trails, but when I look at all the development that's going out in the suburbs, all you see are houses and condos after condos after condos, and roads and sidewalks, but the parks they're limited, and I don't see anything else, and I don't see the room where there's going to be to grow to have those 15-minute communities where people can go to a corner store and get that, carton of milk instead of driving 15, 20 minutes to a grocery store. So that's the one piece that I hope that we can, maybe try to focus as we go forward. I think it's a challenge, but I think that we're up for it. Thank you.
Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to be quick. I think Councillor Schneider said it really well, that this is not a starting point, this is a progression. And speaking of that, I think with our strategic plan, we have to weave in the past wins. I think it's very difficult for us to be progressive and innovative without being reflective of the things that we did well and the things that maybe we haven't done well. So let's take stock of that as well as we put forward our next strategic plan. And the other is, the risk of being hyperbolic, I think we have to be that Kitchener be bold. And I think that can be a part of all of those 5 categories. How do we take it to the next level of each of them? And the last bit that I wanted to kind of add on as well, I don't know if it needs to be another item from the 5 or it can be incorporated in each one, but I think collaboration is a big one. I've heard others say it as well. How do we, focus on collaboration with our peer municipalities? How do we focus on collaboration with our businesses in our community? How do we focus on collaboration with our community leaders that want to do good work, that want to build good communities? So collaboration, I think, it should be a strength. And the last bit I just want to quickly add is, how can we continue to give council good tools and resources for us to do our jobs well as well, to be responsive to the concerns of residents, and to be able to have the necessary resources where we can place good policy as well. And that too is, I think, speaking of, engagement and collaboration within our neighborhoods, how do we try to nurture the next generation of leaders within our respective communities? So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Singh, and I'll make my comments to wrap things up. I too want to thank staff and everyone who's participated, the hundreds of people who have participated already, as well as the 50 who are part of our citizens working group in terms of getting this to this point. I've been impressed with the alignment that clearly seems to exist between my conversations with council, clearly the ones that council has had with Mr. Chapman, and the feedback that's coming back for the community. And I think that speaks to the fact that we've, over many years been trying to develop a culture of this, so it doesn't surprise me as much, maybe as it once would have, but it also is a good reminder that we need to keep our eyes on the ball and make sure that we continue to eyes on the ball and pedal to the metal, I guess is the way to put it, so that we don't become complacent or too comfortable in terms of what we're doing. There were a number of things that were referenced here that almost become cross-cutting themes, and I think that somehow needs to be captured. This notion of being bold in these areas, the piece of looking at it from an equity lens in terms of how we deliver services, who are the faces of our organization, all that kind of thing going forward. I think that needs to become a cross-cutting theme across all 5 of these areas. Speaking to the point that Councillor Davey made, I think, in a world of where we're going to be more challenged for resources, data-based decision-making is going to become more important than ever. Nothing happens without collaboration. It speaks to the barn-raising spirit that former Governor General David Johnston often referred to, and which is also, quite frankly, Goal 17 in the SDGs in terms of partnerships, because that's really what is important. if we talk about sort of what's missing in here, I do think that there needs to be more reference to how this connects in with the SDGs, and I say that, I mean, I think people know that I'm pretty passionate about it, but as Councillor Clancy knows, and as Mr. Reedman knows, Kitchener was the focus of comments from Minister Gould at the recent FCM Sustainable Communities Conference for the great work that our staff have done on this, together with City of Winnipeg and Kelowna, I believe it was, were the three that were mentioned in the minister's speech. And so I think it's important, particularly with the summit coming up later this year, I think it's important that we keep that moving forward. In the belonging and participation piece, and it's probably referenced in the community connection and belonging part, but there's clearly an increased sense of anxiety, an increased sense of divisiveness in society that somehow I think we need to grapple with. Hopefully we don't need to grapple with it for the next 20 years, but I think at the very least we need to grapple with it for the next 4. I can tell you that this has been a conversation around the FCM table. It was a conversation around my UCLG table last week. It's not unique to Canada, whether it's, you know, the conflict, quite frankly, that's happening in Ukraine, whether it's natural disasters, you know, like the earthquake in Turkey, all of these things, you know, the economic realities are playing into this, and we need to grapple with it. And, you know, I'm hearing that, you know, and I think we're experiencing that our staff and us are sensing that from the community ever more so on a regular basis. Under Goal 4, I will say that I think the creative industries focus, and this partially touches on what Councillor Ioannidis was talking about, in terms of music and film and so on, probably somehow needs to get more emphasis, particularly as it relates to our Make It Kitchener 2.0 strategy and you know, the work that has started and will continue with Conestoga College in that space, and somehow strengthen the reference around small business, and Councillor O'Dooney touched on that. It's the foundation, quite frankly, of every community is small business, and I think we want to continue to see that thrive going forward. And the last point that I'll make is just on the notion of somehow under good government, and Councillor Davey again touched on it, was we need to continue to reference the importance of core service delivery, because that is what the residents are looking for, you know, and all this other stuff is important. It's part of building a strong, vibrant community, but at the end of the day, it comes to whether it's a city responsibility or regional responsibility. Can I, you know, drive my car or ride my bike down the road? You know, is the water clean? Does the tap turn on when I turn it on? You know, is the garbage getting picked up? You know, those basic, is the grass getting cut? Those basic things are things that our community relies on us for, and we need to make sure that it continues to be part of the process. And the only other point I will make, and Councillor David, you touched on it, well, today we really focused on the priorities for the next 4 years. This really is it's our new 20-year document with a new 20-year vision, and that 20-year document gets broken down into 5 4-year chunks, and I think we need to capture that or make sure we're articulating that appropriately in a little bit more of a stronger fashion going forward. But other than that, I think everyone, like, if this is all the feedback that we've had, I didn't hear anybody saying, like, we're way off on this or we're way off on that. Clearly, a heck of a lot of great work has happened here, and Catherine, kudos to you and your team for the work that you've done. So, last word to you.
Thank you for your feedback. You'll next see myself and our team in May to talk about the 20-year vision, engage with you on that, and some proposed actions within these 5 areas, with a goal to have the final content of the strategic plan written in June, and then a fall launch. So stay tuned, and I will see you in a couple of months.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Sorry? Councillor Ioannidis, you want to make one last comment? Okay.
Yeah, I also want to emphasize that too. What I've seen here too is, this is by far the best I've seen since my time here. So whatever, I think what we're seeing here is definitely no criticism. This is excellent work.
Thank you.
Just want to make sure that's crystal clear.
It is, thank you.
Okay, great.
Appreciate it.
Motion to adjourn? Councillor O'Dooney, Councillor Clancy, all those in favor, opposed, that's carried. I'm going to say 5 minutes. It'll probably become 10, but